So, guys, in our last session, we have completed, right, entity framework core with the data annotation. So, what are the things we need to achieve? How to manage the database schema using data annotations we have discussed. So, today we are going to start Fluent API configuration with entity framework core. So, whatever we have discussed so far with data annotation, moral, right, you can consider the same thing we can also easily achieve using Fluent API plus additional things which we are going to achieve with Fluent API. That is what we are going to discuss, right? So let us start discussing, right, what is this Fluent API with entity framework. So Fluent API means what, right? You can consider it is another way. It is another way to configure the entity classes and relationship, right, in a more flexible manner. So basically, how to manage the data, right? A database schema in the database, we are having three options. What are the options? One is you can go with the default convention over configuration. By default, entity framework are going to manage the database schema. Second option is data annotation. If you don't want to follow the default naming convention, which is followed by entity framework code, then you can override those default conventions using data annotations. And the third option is, which is also the most flexible option you can consider for customization, is Fluent API. So using Fluent API also, right, we can manage the database schema, but in a more, right, what I can say, flexible manner, right? So it is going to give you more readable, more manageable, more understandable syntax, right? And right, and once you understand Fluent API, then you will feel that yes, it is very easy. But as I said, right? So what I need to do? So for basic configurations, right? If you are achieving the basic configuration using data, using what I can say default naming convention, that is fine. You can go with. If it is achievable using data annotation, that is fine. You can go with it. And if it is very, right, if the configuration is a little bit complex, right, then for complex kind of things, right, we need to go with a Fluent API. So what is Fluent API? Fluent API means it is, you can consider it is based on the Fluent interface design pattern. So if you want to understand what is Fluent API, how it is worked in Entity Framework or how you can configure, right, Fluent configurations to manage the database schema, then first of all, we need to understand Fluent interface design pattern. Until and unless we are not understanding the Fluent interface design pattern, right? So you will not understand Fluent API because Fluent API is definitely it is a way to configure the entity classes relationship, right? But how exactly it is working, that what we need to understand first. So anyone having any idea related to this Fluent interface design pattern?
No, sir.
Right? So, guys, remember, whenever we are working with the design patterns are categorized into three, right? What I can say, three categories. What are these? One is creational, another one is structural, and another one is behavioral. Right? Creational design pattern is basically dealing with the object creation and how we can manage the object. And this fluent interface design pattern, it is basically one type of right? Or you can consider it is one type of right creational design pattern which is dealing with object creation. So how you are creating the object, how you are consuming the methods of that object, that is what we need to understand. So let us try to understand this fluent interface design pattern. And guys, remember, this fluent interface design pattern allows us to implement, or you can say allows us to invoke multiple methods using dot operator one by one, which is also going to give us meaningful statement, right, about the operations what we are performing on the object. And this Fluent interface design pattern extensively, right, very frequently used in framework like Entity Framework Core. So in Entity Framework Core Fluent API, you are going to use this Fluent interface design pattern, right, very frequently in Linux. You are also using, right, even this is also used with a automapper. So framework like Fluent API or Entity Framework or Fluent API, Linux libraries like automapper, right, they are going to use this right Fluent interface design pattern very frequently. So let us first try to understand what is this Fluent interface design pattern. Then we will see how right Entity from core uses this Fluent API design pattern to configure the right settings, or you can say how the database tables are going to be managed in the database, how we can configure the same using Entity Framework or Fluent API. Right. For example, right. Let's assume we are having the student entity. So you can say this is my model, or you can say class, or you can say entity, anything you can call this, that is fine. You can call the student as a model, you can call the student as an entity, you can call it technically student is a class, right? So any, right? So let assume this is my class, and this class is having these properties: registration number, name, DOB, branch, and address. Now, if I want to set the values of these properties, then how I can do this? So definitely I need to create an instance of this class. Yes, something like this using the new operator. I can create the instance, and using the constructor of the class, I can initialize the members, right? How? Once you create the instance, then using that instance student, you can say I'm using student.name, whatever the name, registration number, DOP, branch, address, right? Any value you want to set, right? You can set using this object and the dot operator. Yes or no? So is there any very difficulty to do this thing? No. There is no difficulty, and we are very acquainted, right, with this type of coding. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yes or no?
Sir.
Right. Now the same thing I want to achieve in a different manner. So I don't want to use this name, registration number, DOB, branch address, all these things. Rather than I want to consume the methods, right? I want to initialize this property, student object properties, but in a different manner. How? So I want to create the student object. Then student dot, I'm going to call a method, student registration number. Then I'm going to call another method name of the student. I'm going to call another method born on. I'm going to call another method stay on, and study on, and I'm going to call another method stay. So here you can see the student object is a single object, but using this single object, right? I'm calling multiple methods one after another using the dot operator. And whenever I'm calling the method, whatever data is required by that method, that is what I'm also passing. So this is nothing but your Fluent interface design pattern, which makes your statement more meaningful, more readable, and more understandable. So instead of consuming the properties directly, and instead of using the student object and the again and again and setting the properties again and again, what I can do is I can use the student object once, and I can call multiple methods one after another using the dot operator to set the respective values. So this is nothing but Fluent interface design pattern. From performance point of view, there is no differences. Implementation point of view, there is some differences. What is the differences? That what we will understand. But now, whatever I'm doing here, the same thing is also going to be done by the respective method. So what exactly this method is going to do? So internally, he is going to set this student registration number. Internally, going to set the right registration number property, name of the student. Internally, going to set the name, and so on. Clear? So how to implement? I will show you practically. But what is right Fluent interface design pattern means? It simplifies our object conjunction code by making it simpler, readable, and understandable. Means what? Means by using the same object instance, I can invoke multiple methods one after another using dot operator, and it is going to work absolutely fine. And mostly this right design button is going will come into the picture whenever we want to configure something, or whenever we want to set something, but not whenever we don't want to return anything, expect the object. So how it is going to be performed? So in this case, right, you have to remember. So what whenever I'm calling the student registration number, it is going to set something, and again this student registration number is going to return me one instance of the student object, and again using that instance it is going to invoke the name of the student, and this name of the student going to set the name, again it is going to return me the student instance, and again using that instance this the next method is going to be invoked. So the point that what you need to remember, whenever I'm calling a method, that method internally going to do something, but at the end, that method is going to return me an instance. And guys, remember, whenever I'm invoking any non-static method, without instance, I cannot invoke any non-static method. So in this case, all these are non-static method. So method means non-static method means definitely I need an instance. Without instance, it is impossible to call the method. Then how? Then who is returning that instance? That instance is going to be written by the respective method. So if I'm calling the student registration, remember this method is going to return me one instance, and using that instance, I can call the next method. And again, this method is going to return me an instance. Using that instance, the next method is going to be invoked. So the point is that what you need to remember, so when what this name of the student method returns, So inside that instance, this born on method should be available. Otherwise, it is going to give me error, right? So it is not like that, right? Any method we can invoke. No, that is not true. So what method I am going to invoke, that method should be available based on the return type of the previous method. So what this student registration number method return, if this name of the student method belongs to that instance, then only I can invoke. Otherwise, I cannot invoke. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Right. So now let us see how we can implement. To implement this thing, right, we need to implement something called method chaining. So method chaining means what? It is a technique you can call, or you can call it is a process where multiple methods are called sequentially on an object within a single statement. So in this case, you can say this is my statement start here, and here I can put a question mark. The statement is going to be end. So within a single statement, I can write called multiple methods sequentially, and this is possible because each method going to return an object, and based on that object the next method is going to be invoked. So to implement method chaining, what we need to do, we need to create a wrapper class. So to implement method chaining, what we need to do, we need to create a wrapper class. So what do you mean by wrapper class? Wrapper class means it is a class which is going to be created around another class. So for example, in my application, I'm having the student class. Now, I don't want the student class to be consumed by the client. Rather than I'm going to create a student wrapper class, and that student wrapper class going to be consumed by the client, and the student wrapper class internally going to use the student class. So you can call it is a kind of an intermediate class, right? Between the client and the actual class, that wrapper will be there, which is going to wrap the student object. Whatever features, how you are going to set this properties of the student object, that will be taken care by the student wrapper class, and the client is going to consume the student wrapper class, and student wrapper class internally going to make use of the student class. Let's see how we can do. So for this purpose, I need to create one wrapper class. So right, you can see this is my wrapper class, student wrapper class, and inside that class I have created an instance of a student. And here you can see for setting the registration number, name of the student, born on, study on, stay on, right? It is taking the respective input values, and then that respective input values is going to be set in the student entity, right, inside this student instance. And finally it is going to return me this. So this is nothing but the current object, right? That current object using which we are calling this method, that instance I'm also returning from this method. So using that same instance, I can call the next method, and the next method. So here this is nothing but the current instance, right? So once you have this Fluent interface, or you can say Fluent student wrapper, now I can create the Fluent student wrapper instance. And then using this Fluent student instance, I can invoke the method something like this. Now, the student registration number, it is going to return me an instance of a Fluent student. That means, so currently what object I have created? A Fluent student. So that Fluent student instance, what I'm using to invoke the student registration number method, the student registration number method internally, right, going to set the registration number, right, inside the registration number property. But at the end, it is also going to return me the current instance. Current instance means whichever instance I'm using to invoke this method, that instance also this method is returning. So once it return the Fluent student instance, then I can call the next method name of the student. Why? Because this name of the student method is also available inside the Fluent student instance. And like the way we can invoke all this method one after another, something like this, which is going to give you meaningful statement, right? Understandable, usable, right? Maintainable, or you can say, uh, which is going to give a human rights statement, right? So by looking at this statement, right, any non-programmer, they can also understand, yes, we are setting the registration number, we are setting the name of the student, born on, something like this. Clear?
Yes. So,
Okay. Let us implement this complete example code. So for this purpose, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a simple console application.
yeah. Here one question.
Yes.
So, what is the real-time usage of this particular design pattern? Can we have any example for that?
So That is what I'm going to discuss now using Fluent Inter API. So the entity framework core, right? What we are going to learn? We are going to learn Fluent API using entity framework core, right? So you have any the basic knowledge of LinQ?
Yes.
So in basic in LinQ, are you calling multiple method one after another using dot operator,
Okay. No, in one statement we are going to retrieve the data.
right? Right. So you are calling multiple method using the dot operator in LinQ or not?
Yes.
So how that is implemented, how that is working?
Oh,
Have you
okay.
think about this?
Okay. Using the
Obviously.
Fluent API configuration.
Obviously, so that is the reason
Okay.
why before starting the Fluent API, right, right, the way we are working with the LinQ, the way we are working with the AutoMapper, right, in the same way we are also going to work with the Fluent API with Entity Framework code. So before directly going into the example, I want to give you the clear picture, right, how this is implemented internally, how we are calling multiple method one after another, and they are working as expected. Right, that is what behind the scene story is more important than writing the code. That is the reason why I'm giving this example. Getting my clarity? So what I have told you from the beginning, right? So this Fluent API is extensively used by right Entity Framework Core, LinQ, AutoMapper, right? So these are the things, right? Framework they are using this Fluent interface design pattern, right? And in our example, whenever we are creating the student, we are very acquainted with this approach. Instead of this approach, you can go with this approach, no issue, right? But why I'm going to create a wrapper class? Why I'm going to create the method for setting the properties? Well, why I'm going to do so much complicated things? Okay, let me go ahead and directly create the instance and consume the properties like this. That is what we are following, right? But whatever framework, right, they are using, right, they are not exposing, right, the properties, right? So they are providing method services, you can consider method, and the method you can call one after another using the dot operator. But how this is working internally, that what I'm trying to make you understand. Clear? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, so this is you can consider any framework you take into consideration, right? They are using this is very extensively, right? So framework means you can take right entity framework core, you can take LinQ, you can take AutoMapper, right? They are using this very frequently. Right? So once you understand this thing, right, then once you start discussing the application using entity framework core, you'll understand. So this is my student entity. You can see registration number, DOP branch and address. This is my wrapper, student wrapper. Here I'm creating the student instance and I'm setting the properties, right? And the current and in each method I'm returning the current instance. So this method means what? Now using whichever instance currently the student fluent student you can say you can give this name as something like fluent student, right? So this fluent student instance, right? This method is going to return, right? So you might be getting confused on what is the why you are creating student. We should follow proper naming convention. The instance is a fluent student. This instance, what I'm using to invoke this method or this method or this method, right? That same instance is written by this method, right? So that is what we are doing. And then, right, you can see now I'm accessing the method one after another using the dot. Clear?
Is that
Clear or not?
sequence is important?
The sequence it is not important, right? You can put any sequence, right? So here you can put. So here it is also fine. So what is important in this case? Important is this case is whatever method I'm returning. For example, let assume this born on method doesn't return anything. Return type is void. So now if this method is void, then once I call the born none method, then I cannot call any other method. For example, you can say born none. So at this point, this method is returning void. Void means I cannot call the next method. Getting my point?
Yeah,
So
thanks.
right. So until and unless it is returning the current instance, you can invoke. So it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter that it's always going to return fluent student. For example, I'm going to write something here, right? Another class I'm creating, public class. It is some class. Okay, public class, some class, right? So here, what I'm doing here, I'm calling this stay as method. My method is here, right? I'm not returning anything. I'm just returning, right? This is going to be return some void, and it is not going to do anything special. Let's do some internal logic is there inside this method. Now, what I'm going to do? This Born method, right? It is not going to return the instance, right? It is going to set the DOB, but rather than this Fluent interface, it is going to return some class instance. So this is my Born method. It is going to return some different instance. So it is also possible that it is not mandatory that it is always going to return the same class instance. It can return any instance. Now the return type is going to be some class. So once this method is written, right, born method, right, you can see this is my born method. So after the born method, I can call the stay at method. Why? But now I'm getting an error. No.
No.
Why I'm not
No.
getting an error? Because in this case, born method returning some class instance and using that some class instance, it is calling stay at method. Is this method available in the stay at some class? Yes, it is available. That is the reason why it is invoking. So what is important you need to remember, whenever I'm calling the next method, you have to remember what instance this previous method is returning inside that class. Is this method available or not? If it is available, then only you can call. Otherwise, you cannot call. Clear?
Stays at is what about stays at?
Clear, guys?
Hello.
Sir, I didn't get this last point you said.
Sorry?
The last thing you said, I didn't get
So you
that.
just tell me. You just tell me. Forget about everything. This is a method stay R. If I want to invoke this method, what I need?
Create an instance.
You need one instance. Instance means what? Which class instance? The class at which this method is available. Yes or
This
no?
method is yes, yes.
So now you just tell me this stay at method is available in Fluent student class or it is available in some class.
State method is available in some class.
Some class. That means if I want to invoke this method at this point of time, line number 14, right? I need an instance of some class or not.
Yes,
So this born method, right? What I'm calling. So is this born method returning me an instance of some class or not? That's what we need to check. Now, if you go to the definition of born method, is this method returning an instance of some class?
yes, yes, yes.
So that is the reason why I'm able to invoke this method. Now, instead of this some class, if this method going to return me this Fluent student class, right? So in this case, right, what will happen? So now what will happen? Now the program will compile or not? You just tell me. I'm not going to show you the this line. So in this case, if I'm changing this from some class to this, my application is going to compile or not?
No.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Compile or
No.
not? It
Yes.
will compile.
Yes, sir. Compile.
How it is going to compile? Go right. Where is the logic? So now you just tell me. So this Bornal method, what it is returning, which class instance it is returning?
Fluent student.
Mm.
Then it is
Yeah,
calling the
it
studian
won't
so
compile,
stay at
sir.
method. Inside this class, our stay at method is available or no?
No, it won't
If not
compile.
available, then how it is going to be compiled? So you are calling one method of X class using the Y class object, right? Is this going to work? Is this going to compile?
No.
No. Then how you are saying yes? So here you should get compile time error because this Bornal method returning an instance of a Fluent student, but this method stay as it is not available in the Fluent student class. That is the reason why it is game. What it is saying, Fluent student doesn't contain a definition stay at and no extensible extension method accepting a first argument of this type. So that is what you need to remember. So now, if I change this Fluent student to write what I can say from class, then it is going to work. So this is right. What I'm understanding, guys. Remember, you guys are not aware about design patterns. Now it is working. Why? Because this method is returning an instance of a some class. So always remember. So whatever method I'm invoking here, based on the return type, only the next method is going to be invoked. So based on the return type of this method, the next method is going to be invoked. So and so on. But here, what is important? What method I'm calling here? That method is available on the class this studier method is returning. Suppose it is returning a class instance X, then this Born method should available on a X class. If it is not available, you will get compile time error. Clear or not?
Then stay at method, if you wrote in the line number 12, then it won't work.
Sorry? Line number where? Line number 12.
It won't work then.
How it will work?
Yes, correct. Got it. Because it's
Because
returning
in
some
this case,
classes.
this is not
Yes.
working. No. Right.
Yes.
So now we are calling stay at method on the after studier. Right. So here my studier method is there. Okay. Let me give this as a right. What I can say, some class return new some class.
No, it work.
Right. And now you can see this stay at method is working. And the stay at method, after the stay at method, born on need not working. Why? Stay at, in this case, when I call stay at, it is returning void. Okay. So now if I want to make sure this is going to be work, then what I can do is I can return here, right, fluent student, right? Then here what I can do is return new fluent student. So with these changes, now my application will work. Clear? Why? Because the stay at method returning an instance, and on whatever instance it is returning fluent student. Then the next method born on is available on the fluent student class. Yes, available. So I can invoke. Clear or not?
Yes.
Right? So this is what you need to remember. Always whatever the next method I'm invoking, that method is going to be invoked by the instance what is written by the previous method. So if this method available within the instance means one class. Is this method available with the class that instance this method is returning? If available, it will invoke, otherwise it will give you compile time error. Clear? Guys, I don't understand. I have given you access to C# session. Why you are not learning the advanced concept like design buttons? If you are not learning, that is not right my problem, right? But it is going to be your loss only, not my loss. I'm not going to write what I can say lose anything, right? At the end, you are going to lose the concept, right? So because you guys are working with so many years, but have you ever thought about how these things are working behind the scene? I'm using Linko calling multiple method one after another using dot operator, using entity right automapper calling one right multiple method one after another. It is working. Have you ever thought about how this is working behind the scene? Right? See, always try to remember if something is working, how it is working. That is important. And that is important means you should know this thing. Behind the scene story is always important rather than writing the code and all these things. Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, you're right. Yeah,
Yes, sir.
Right. Right.
you're
So
correct.
now
Yeah.
right now we are going to discuss right configuring fluent API. I'm just showing you this example means what this is just a screenshot right but once right then I will show you how you can implement this real time, right? Currently don't ask me what is the property, what is column name, what is Haj column order, what is Haj column type. Don't ask me anything related to this thing, right? What is important you can see here, model builder that entity method, property method, has column name, has column order, has column type. That means using the same model builder instance, am I able to invoke multiple method using dot operator?
Yes, sir.
Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes or no? That is,
Yes,
that
sir.
means it means is this Fluent interface design pattern that is implemented by Entity Framework or Fluent API configurations?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
So
sir.
now, if this thing I need to achieve using right what I can say data annotation, then what I need to do, I need to use data annotation attribute. I need to decorate them with right what I can say on the property. If I want to implement multiple annotations, I have to decorate that property with the multiple data annotation attribute. But here, right, in a very simple or conscious manner, right, we can achieve the same thing. This is how we need to configure the models, right, using entity framework core, right? Entity framework core, Fluent API. So what is this property, hash column, all these things we are going to discuss, but don't worry. But I just give you one clear picture that using the model builder instance, we can configure the Fluent API within our TP context class. That is what you need to remember. How to configure, what are the different things we can achieve, what are the different level of configuration, we'll discuss. But what I need to do, we have to override the onModel creating method of our TP context class. And using the model builder instance, I need to configure the entities and properties using entity framework or Fluent API method. So this property, entity, hash column name, so these are nothing but one Fluent API methods. That what we need to use to configure Fluent API configurations. Clear? Clear, guys?
Yes.
Right. So now before proceeding further, right, what we need to do, we need to understand, right, what are the different Fluent API configuration? I mean, what are the different levels where we can apply? So one is a model-wide, or you can say global configuration. Another one is entity configuration. Another one is property configuration. What exactly it means? It means using Fluent API, we can configure at three different levels. So let us try to understand what do you mean by model-wide or global configuration, what do you mean by entity configuration, and what do you mean by property configuration. Guys, remember, model-wide configuration means what? It is global. Global means what? Now, whatever configuration I'm providing, that will be applicable for all the models, for all the database tables you can consider. For example, if I want to specify the default database schema for all tables, I'm not specifying, yes, right? What exactly it means? It means I want to make sure that all the tables, whatever entity framework core is going to be generated, they should generate with some default schema called admin. For example, whatever decimal properties I'm using throughout all the entities, I want to set the default schema as 10, 2. I mean some decimal precision. Suppose you are creating multiple entities and all these entities are having some kind of a string properties, and you want to set a default right string length, that is 500 it should be the length, right, of all the string properties, then you can consider, right, you can configure them using model wide, right? For example, right, what you want to do is you are creating many entities, and many right foreign keys are going to be created in many different database tables. Now you want to set, right, some kind of a cascade behavior for all the entities, that it should created with the cascade on delete cascade or on delete set null, on delete no action, right? So whatever you want to configure, and if you want to configure globally for all the relationships, I mean, for all the foreign keys, whatever generated by framework, then you can do this using model-wide configuration. So model-wide configuration means whatever configuration we are going to do, they will be applicable globally to all the entities. Clear? Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
This is model-wide configuration. And whatever I'm showing here, right, everything I'm going to show you practically. And these are the settings which is not possible using data annotations. This is not possible using data annotations, right? So that is the things what if you want to achieve, you have to use Fluent API. Right? Entity configuration. But see, now whatever we have discussed this thing, right? Can we do this thing based on the entities? Yes. This is also entity configuration means what? Now in this case, the configuration, whatever we are going to provide, that is specific to a specific entity. For example, you want to configure a particular table name. Yes, this is my entity name, and I want to configure this table name should be so and so. Suppose you want to configure the primary key, you want to configure the composite primary key, you want to configure the indexes, right? You want to configure the relationship, you want to configure the delete behavior, you want to ignore some of the entities, you want to create some unique constant, right? So if you want to do this thing, right, for a specific entity, then in that case, you need to go with the entity configuration. So entity configuration means it is only applicable to the specific entity for which you are doing the configuration. Global means all entity. Entity configuration means specific entity. Specific entity means whatever properties available within that entity, it is going to applicable to them. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Right. Similarly, property level configuration means it is specific to individual properties, right? For example, you want to specify one column name should be this. You want to specify this column data type should be this. You want to specify this column default value should be this. You want to specify this should be not null or nullable column. You want to specify the maximum length for this particular string property is this. You want to specify what should be the decimal right, the precision and scale value. You want to specify some computed column for some specific property. If you want to set some concurrency tokens, you want to create some shadow properties, or even if you want to ignore some properties which we achieved using no map, right? Not mapped attribute. The same thing is also possible, right? Using Fluent API. So in this case, right, whatever list I have provided here, these things, right, is specific to property of an entity, and that is what we can also achieve using Entity Framework Core. How to do this? We'll discuss. Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Right? So model world means entire model or database schema. Entity means specific entity. Property means specific property of an entity. Clear? Yes or no?
So these all things we can do by this Fluent API.
Sorry, what you are asking? I'm not getting.
These are kind of things we can do by using this Fluent API configuration.
Sorry, which configuration?
So these all things we can do by this Fluent API configuration. These all things you.
That is what I'm
That is
explaining.
what sir is saying, na?
That is what
Okay,
I'm
okay.
saying. So these are things what I'm showing here. This is possible using Fluent API. That is what we are learning. We are learning here Fluent API. That is the reason why first Fluent interface design button I have given to you. Right? And why I'm giving? Because this configuration, whatever I'm showing here, for configuring this thing, I'm going to use that Fluent interface design button. And whatever I have provided, these things I'm going to show you practically using Fluent API. And this configuration, they have categorized into three types. One is model world, or you can say global, means it will be applicable to all entities. Entity configuration means specific entity. Property configuration means specific property of an entity. Right. So whatever list I have provided, right, setting default schema, precision, max length, all these things, right, here whatever list I have provided, here whatever list I have provided, everything I'm going to show you practically. Right. So I'm not showing here what do you mean by saddle property, what do you mean by right, computed columns precision, right? So this is, I'm not giving you this example, right? You can consider. So if I'm giving means I will show you practically. So let us proceed and understand, right? First, right, one of the most difficult, or you can say interesting concept, that is what I can say, a relationship. So because people are right, many people are right sending me, not many, two, three people, right, they are sending me message that, sir, we are not understanding the relationship between entities in a detailed manner. We are unable to determine what do you mean by principal entity, what do you mean by dependent entity, how we can decide which one is going to be the principal, which one going to be the dependent entity, right? How we can design the relationship in an efficient manner, right? I'm getting question, many, not many, three, four people they have pinged me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a relationship, right? So we have already discussed. We have already discussed how to implement one-to-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many. But now let us try to elaborate this thing in more detailed manner, right? So more detailed manner means what? I'm going to show you one-to-one how you can achieve using default convention, how you are going to achieve using data annotation, and our most important thing, how we can achieve the same using entity framework or Fluent API. That is what we are also going to discuss. So let us try to understand. See, guys, remember, relationship means what? Relationship means what? The relationship means how the data of one table is related to the data of another table. Without relationship, we cannot relate the data of one table to another table. So if we want to store the data in multiple table, and if we want to establish the relationship between them, then we need to use the relationship in entity framework. And whenever we are going to establish the relationship, we need to understand two important components. One is principal entity, another one is dependent entity. So what do you mean by principal entity and what do you mean by dependent entity? Entity which contains the master data, or the, what you can say, the data which is exist without any dependency, that entity is said to be principal entity most of the time. this entity going to be, this entity is also called as the primary key table, or you can say unique key table, right? So basically this entity should have one column which is going to uniquely identify the record, and this entity can exist without any dependency. Dependent entity means what? The entity contains the foreign key. So simple what you can say, if the entity contains the primary key, but there is no foreign key, then that entity is going to be the principal entity. And the entity which contains the, right, what I can say, foreign key, that is going to be your dependent entity, right? So always you have to remember the dependent entity is always going to be contains the foreign key. And that foreign key will point to the primary key or a unique key of your principal entity. Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, so there are two entity principal which is going to contain your data, and this entity data can exist without any dependent. But dependent entity means they cannot exist without the principal entity. Whatever data I'm going to store, that existence it is going to check in the principal entity. And for that existence check, what I need to do, I need to create a key, or you can say foreign key in the dependent entity, and that foreign key value must be exist in the principal entity, either the primary key column value or in the unique key column value. So whenever we are working with a relationship, we need to understand one is the primary key. This primary key means it is a column or set of columns which is going to uniquely identify row, right, each row in a table. Foreign key means it is a column or you can set of columns. Set of columns means I have already given you the example that we can also create composite primary key as well as composite foreign key, right? So foreign key can be also composite. So, and whenever we are going to implement the relationship are going to be implemented based on the navigation properties. And this navigation properties allows the entities classes, right, to navigate from one entity to its related entity or a collection of entities. And again, as we have already discussed, how many types of navigation properties are there, guys? There are two types of navigation property. One is reference navigation property, and another one is collection navigation property. So in the case of one-to-one, we need to use reference navigation property. And in the case of one-to-many or many-to-many relationship, we need to use, right, collection navigation property. For example, right, in the case, suppose I'm giving you some example, right? Customer, address. So, or you can say employee and address. So what type of relationship between them? User,
One, two.
One to one.
password.
One
What
to
kind
one.
of one-to-one? Employee, departments. What kind of
One too
relationship?
many.
One to many. One employee
One to
has a
many.
different.
Yes. Students, right? Courses. What kind of relationship?
One
Many
to
to
One
many.
to many. One to many.
Many to many.
Many to
So,
many. Sorry.
so
Many
this
to.
is this is your one-to-one, right? One-to-one. This is also going to be your one-to-one. This is going to be your one-to-many.
Sir, here
Similarly,
departments also only one employee can relate to one department only, right?
sorry,
Here, third one also, like
why
department.
why thinking about only one employee belongs to one department? Yes, that is fine. That is the reason why I have specified one. But each department can have multiple employees or not,
Yes, yes, yeah.
Yes, yes.
right? So order items. So order and order items. So what should be the relationship,
1 to M.
One to M.
right? And here student courses,
Many to many.
right? So here, right, one student can have a
Sir,
multiple,
one doubt.
and one course can be enrolled by multiple students. So this is going to be
Sir,
your
I have
unique.
one doubt.
Yes.
In the third uh, thing, you have said that it is employee to department is one to many. When that guy asked the question, you said that one employee can have multiple. Sorry, one department can have multiple employees, which means
Yes.
department to employee is uh, one to many. No.
What
Many
I'm
to
saying
one.
here, I'm not specifying right from employee to department or a department to employee. So this is the overall relationship, right? If someone asks you What could be the relationship between department employee or employee department? You need to tell this thing. One department can have multiple employees, or one employee can be belongs to a particular department. So one to one will come into the picture when both the entities involving in the relationship contains reference navigation property. In this case, right, both the entities will contain reference navigation property or not?
So,
Yes.
So guys, remember, whenever I'm saying one to many, you can also call this as a many to one. No issue. Clear?
Okay, sir.
So this is also called as many to one. So accordingly from which entity you are starting, whether you are starting from principal to dependent or dependent to principal, it is up to you. Right? So you can
So,
tell one to many or
so
many to many. That is not an issue, right? So in
e-
this case, right? So
employee
both
to employee to address in case like if they have like a permanent address and like temporary address. So in that case,
if that is your case, right? If you are storing multiple addresses for an employee, then in case it is going to be one to many.
yeah.
Clear? So it is up to you, right? So how you are designing the database. So if you are designing the database, right? What I can say, if you are designing the database to handle multiple addresses for a single employee, then it is going to be one to many. If you are designing the database that one employee should have only one address, then this is going to be one to one. So based on the requirement, you can decide. You are the developer, so whatever you want, you can do it, right? So one user can have only one passport. So this is also going to be one to one. And in this case, both entities, right, having what kind of a reference navigation properties? Having, right, both the entities having, right, reference navigation property. In this case, also both entities are going to be have a reference navigation property. So in this case, right, one of the entity going to contain, right, what you can say, this employee, it will contain the reference navigation property, and another entity, in this case, it is going to contain the collection navigation property. So the point that what you need to remember, whenever you are implementing one to one, then both entities are going to have a reference navigation property. This clear is clear. This point is clear. One to one means what? In the two entities which are involved in the relationship, they must contain the reference navigation property. Clear?
Yes.
yes, sir. So, but one also a kind of one-to-many relation most of the times, right? Because, for
No.
example, there is two employees. The two employees might be coming from the same family, so they might have the same address, right?
The same family they are coming, but but in that case, right? I cannot store both employees' address in the right. So here, right? Whatever we are talking, if they are having the same address, then in the address table, which employee ID I need to store?
Will be
So
different.
here I'm not storing. See here in the address table, that address information might be same, but the employee ID is going to be same or different.
Understood, sir.
Different.
Yeah, okay.
Right? So in that case, if both two employees are coming from the same family, the employee ID is going to be different. And that's different I'm storing here. Here I'm not mentioning whatever address information I'm storing. You can store same address, different address, no matter. But what is an important thing? Whatever the foreign key in this table, that should point to a unique, the foreign key value in this table is going to be unique. You cannot have a duplicate, right, employee ID in the address table if you are going with one to one. The same in this case also. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Sir,
Right?
here itself, and the second example, the reference means what? It's a foreign key or what the navigation property, what it means by the reference?
Yeah, to
Foreign key
be
reference.
frankly saying, so frankly saying, whatever you are talking, I'm not understanding clearly. So can you please
Uh,
little and answer the
Sir, what I
question?
am saying in the employee and department relationship,
Forget,
the
forget about the employee department. I'm talking about this too. What do you mean by one-to-one relationship? And in the case of a one-to-one relationship, both the entities are going to contain reference navigation property. User entity contain a reference navigation property pointing to password. Password will contain a reference navigation property pointing to user. Is that clear? Or this one-to-one is clear or not?
Yes, yes. Sir, this the reference navigation property means it's what it's mean by its foreign key or the navigation property.
I'm not going to discuss what do you mean by reference navigation property. Are you joining for the first time today?
No, no.
Then why you are asking what do you mean by reference navigation property? After discussing so many times, right? If you are asking what do you mean by reference navigation property, what do you mean by collection navigation property, I can't explain at this point of time because these things we have discussed many times. Am I right, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes.
Right? So if you are right, if you are right, already we have taken 8 sessions related to entity framework core. And from day one, I'm discussing this is the reference navigation property, this is the collection navigation property, and how to implement the relationship. But after 8 sessions, if you are asking me, sir, what do you mean by reference navigation property? What I can answer to you?
Sir, that's I know, sir, about the navigation property. What I'm asking is if you are adding one a navigation property for the address in the employee, is it need to add the foreign key there?
Foreign key, what I'm saying. So, whenever I'm discussing the primary key, foreign key, what I've discussed, foreign key can be automatically defined by the entity framework. Foreign key we can explicitly specify. If the foreign key default convention is not followed by the framework, you can also explicitly specify using the foreign key attribute. So at that time, what you are doing, right? Whenever we are discussing the foreign key concept, did you attend that session or not?
Yes, yes.
I see what I'm saying. Whatever concept I have already discussed in depth, right? If you are going to ask the same question in our right in the next session or to next session, right? Then what I'm going to do? Whatever I'm planning for today's session, that concept I will explain, or whatever sessions we have already completed before 4 days, 5 sessions, that concept I'm going to explain. I'm going to be blank, right? Blank. What I'm going to do? So what I can say at this point of time, wait, once the session completed, whatever your question related to previous session, I will ask, right? I will give you answer, but not now. So in between the session, I'm not going to take any sessions related to the previous session. If I'm going to explain you what is collection navigation property, how to prepare the foreign key, right? Then it is going to be waste of time for other members, right, who are attending the session. I don't want to waste anybody's precious time. If you are not understanding, fine, I'm going to explain you the concept, but once the current session ends. Clear?
Okay.
Because, right, whatever, I don't want, right, anybody time to be wasted, right? Currently, what is our main objective for today's session? How we can implement one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many using a Fluent API. But still, if you are having question, what do you mean by right one-to-one relationship? What do you mean by right reference navigation property? What do you mean by collection navigation property? How the foreign key is created, right? I'm not right. I can't explain at this point of time. To be very frankly saying, right, I'm always very point to point, and whatever I'm going to explain, I will explain. But you have to, right? What I'm saying, you are not attending the session regularly. That is what I understand. Even though you are not doing practices, to be frankly say, you just tell me what you have attended the foreign key, primary key, composite foreign key, composite primary key. When I discussed, did you attend that session?
Yes, yes, I'm attended.
Then,
From
then
the beginning,
you attend, that's fine. Then what you understand in that session?
so I
If you
understood
attend,
what about.
you understood or not?
Yes, I'm understood.
Then if you understood, then why you are asking the same question again?
But it's also in the video. You can check the video also. It's well
I have
explained in the video.
I have explained in the video, forget about video. The documentation what I have provided, that is also more than video. Did you practices those things? Did you practices those things or not?
Yes, sir. Practice.
Then what is your query? Then if you understand the concept, if you attend the live session, if you do the practices, then why again there is some query?
Sir,
If
what
you
I'm
have to,
asking is, sir, in the one-to-one relationship, is it need to add the foreign key in the both entities? That's what I'm asking.
You just tell me, you just tell me, forget about this entity framework core and all these things. If you are designing a database table, how you can add the foreign key in both the entities? Is this going to be work? You will be adding a foreign key of address ID in the employee table, employee ID in the address table as a foreign key. How it is possible?
Okay, fine.
How you
The
say,
result
while
in
I'm mentioning the employee data, where I will get the address ID? What address ID?
cyclical dependency to result in cyclical dependency.
Circle of dependency you will get, na? So in that case, the nature entity is not going to be created. So you cannot create the employee entity because address not doesn't exist. You cannot create address entity because employee ID is not exist. So circular dependency will be there, and this is not related to entity framework code. This concept is already there in right database. Right? So what I'm saying, right, guys, remember whatever we are discussing here, it is completely based on your database. If your database knowledge is very poor, right, then in that case, I cannot help so much. What I'm doing here, whatever is related to entity framework code, those concepts I'm explaining. Right. But if you having basic, if you are very right, if you don't have any basic SQL knowledge, then in that case, right, I cannot make you right master in SQL. Okay. So that's fine. So in this case, employee and entity, both entities are going to be create the what I can say reference navigation property, and the foreign key is going to be created in which entity, guys?
Dependency.
Dependent.
Created dependent entity, right? Now you tell me between these two entity, employee and address, or you can say pass user and password, which one is the principal entity and which one is the dependent entity?
Employee is the principal.
Employee is the
And
principal, address is the
entity is
department. Why?
dependent.
Address depends on the employee. User is the principal and passport is the dependent. So in this case, in the address table and in the passport table, we need to create the foreign key. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Now coming to this employee and departments, or you can say order and order items. So employee departments, order and order items. So in this case, right, so what I am going to do is I'm also going to define the many to many, one to many or many to one relationship, right? So in this case, right, first of all, you need to define which one is the principal entity and which one is the dependent entity. So between employee and the department, which one is the principal entity, guys?
Employee.
Department.
Employee is the employee is the principal
Principal
entity, right?
entity.
Employee is the principal entity, right?
Yes.
Yes,
How,
yes.
how you are saying that
No,
principal entity?
department.
Department should be the principal.
Department.
So why you guys are not utilizing your brain? I don't understand. Principal entity means what? The entity which can exist without any dependency. So in this case, if you are thinking employee is the principal entity, can an employee exist without a department? And whenever I'm going to create a department, do I need employee?
No.
In this case, which one is going to be the principal entity? It is the department.
Department.
Clear?
Department.
Dependent entity in this case, it is going to be the employee. Why? Because employee is depending on the department. So the principal entity, whichever you are in this case, the entity is going to contain the collection navigation property or reference navigation property.
Collection.
Collection.
And the dependent entity is going to contain the reference
Reference.
navigation. And in the dependent entity, what it is going to do, it is going to create
Foreign
the
key.
foreign key. Clear? Now, coming to
It's
this
clear.
order and right, coming to this order and order items. So you just tell me which one is the principal entity?
Order.
Order.
Because I need to
Order.
create the order, then based on the order, I need to create the order item. So order is going to be my principal entity. So in this order, I should have one collection property called order items, list of order items. And the dependent entity in this case is going to be order items, right? So order items. Clear? So in this case, in the reference key is going to be inside this, and the foreign key is going to be created inside the this table, right? Order items. Clear?
Yes,
Clear
sir.
or
sir.
not?
Yes, sir.
What, so first of all, you need to decide which one is the principal entity, which one is the dependent entity. In the case of one-to-one, either it is a principal entity or dependent entity, both are going to contain the reference navigation property. But whichever is the dependent entity, inside that dependent entity, we need to create the foreign key. In the case of what I can say many to one to many, again you have to do the same thing. You have to decide which one is the principal entity, which one is going to be the dependent entity. In the principal entity, you need to define the collection navigation property, and in the dependent entity, you need to define the reference navigation property as well as the foreign key property. And in the case of many to many, which one is the principal entity and which one is the dependent entity, guys? In this example,
Course is the principal.
Course
Both
is
are
principal.
principal and
No, course will be principal.
Principal.
yes,
Student is
course
the
will be
dependent.
principal. Okay, course will be principal and the student will be dependent, right?
Dependent.
No. There will be joining table. One more table will be created, third table. So there we will have student ID and course ID.
Forget about the third table. First of all, whatever I'm asking, give
Yeah.
me the answer. Which one is the principal entity and which one is the dependent entity?
Both will be principal.
Both will be principal, or in one is going to be principal and the other one is going to be dependent. So if I'm saying course is the principal and student is the dependent, how many of you are agree?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Because the
So there-
courses, say students is depend on courses. No? Without courses, student we cannot have record on the student.
you just tell
At
me.
least student will join a particular course. No?
See, you just tell me. So again, what I'm saying, guys, remember, you guys are not right understanding the concept when I discussed many to many. So what I have discussed from the beginning. So in this case, if I'm going to create a student without any course, is there any problem?
No,
If I'm creating a course without any student, is there any problem?
no.
No.
In this case, student itself exists without course. Course itself exists without student. So many to many means what? I'm not going to create a foreign key either in the student entity or in the courses entity. If there is no foreign key in both the entities means what? Both entities are going to be only principal entity. So as a principal entity, both entity going to contains the navigation property of which type?
Collection.
Reference.
collection.
Many means a collection. So in this
Collection.
case, it is going to contain a collection property pointing to student. Student is going to contain a collection property pointing to courses. Both are going to be the principal entity. Principal entity means there is no foreign key inside the courses table or the students table. So for this purpose, in this case, they will introduce something called joint table. And joint table, it is going to be the course students, right? Whatever course students. And inside this table, right, what it is going to do, it is going to contain two columns. One is course ID, another one is going to be
Student ID.
student ID, whatever the primary key. So this student ID, course ID, this is going to be a composite primary key. So this is going to be my primary key. This is also going to be my primary key. So composite primary key. And this is also going to be foreign key. And this foreign key will point to which table? It points to courses table ID column. Courses table primary key column, right? Or primary key, or you can say unique key, whatever key you define, right? And in this case, this will point to the students table primary key column. Clear? Clear
The
or not?
foreign key points to
In
itself.
case, yes, in case of a many-to-many relationship, both entities are going to be only the principal entity. Both entity going to be contains the collection navigation property. There is no foreign key are going to be created in the student and the courses table. To manage the many-to-many relationship, it is going to make use of a joining table. Automatically, framework will create this table. And this table is going to contain two columns. That is going to be composite primary key, and each column is also going to be a foreign key pointing to the respective tables, right? So it will point to the courses table primary key column. Okay, and this is going to point to students table primary key. Clear? Right or not? Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
What is UK? What is unique area?
Unique.
Unique key. Unique key. So you know what do you mean by unique key in SQL?
Yeah.
So that is nothing but. So short form PK means primary key, UK means unique key, right? So it is, don't think that a foreign key always pointing to the primary key. It can also point to the unique key constant, right? That is also possible in SQL Server. You can also try this one, right? So this is all about the different types of relationship and how to manage the relationship. And what do you mean by required and optional relationship? Can anybody tell me? If the foreign key what we are created, if that column accepting null value, that means it is a optional relationship, right? That means that can exist without the principal entity. But if that is a mandatory one, if that is a required one, then that is going to be the required relationship. In the case of a required relationship, the dependent entity cannot exist without the foreign key. So if someone asks you what is the difference between, right, I mean, what is the difference between a required relationship and a optional relationship, you can tell. So in case of a required relationship, the foreign key cannot be null. He cannot accept null value. And in that case, right, the foreign key entity cannot be exist without the principal entity. And in the case of optional relationship, what you need to tell, optional relationship means the foreign key can accept null value and the dependent entity can be exist without the principal entity. Clear?
Yep.
Clear or not? For example,
Yes,
right?
sir.
For example, I'm taking the example of this department and employee. So in this case, the foreign key what I have created, it is a nullable type. If a nullable type, then while I'm creating the employee, I can store the department ID as null. Why? Because it is nullable type, the relationship is optional, right? But in this case, this is not null. Not null means what? Now, not null means what? Now, if I'm entering one order items, means what? That order ID must be exist. Without order ID, I cannot create an order item. So here I have to make this foreign key as mandatory, foreign key as required. And if I make this foreign key as required, means it is a not null. Not null means what? It cannot be exist without the order entity. But in this case, if it is null, then what I can do is I can create an employee without the department. For example, one employee joined the organization and the HR team is not aware that this employee belongs to which department. So in that case, what they can do is they can create the employee without specifying any department. And that is possible only if the foreign key, that reference key is nullable type. Clear? Clear or not? Right? Is that clear? What do you mean by
Yeah.
required? What do you mean by
Yes.
Yes,
optional
yes.
relationship?
Yes, sir.
Required means that foreign key is going to be not null. Optional means foreign key can be null. Null means what? That the dependent entity can be exist without the principal entity. And if it is not null, then dependent entity cannot exist without the principal entity. So that is what you need to remember, right? So now let us try to understand, right, how to implement one-to-one, one-to-many, and a many-to-many relationship as well as the self-referential relationship. So we have discussed the basic concept. What do you mean by principal entity? What do you mean by dependent entity? Where we need to create the constraint, right? What do you mean by optional and required entity, right? And where the foreign key is going to be created? All these things we have discussed. One thing what you need to remember, whenever we are going to implement the one-to-one relationship, we can implement the relationship using two ways. What are the ways? One of the way is to create the shared primary key. Another way is to create a foreign key as a unique key. So both of this option I'm going to explain, right? Suppose you want to implement the one-to-one. Now, how you can implement one-to-one relationship? For example, in this case, this right, what example I'm taking, right, user and password. So how you can make, right, this uh, one-to-one relationship? How you can implement this? So if you want to implement this kind of relationship, so whatever the foreign key you are creating, right? For example, in the password, right, in the password table, I'm going to create the foreign key on the user ID column. right? User ID column. Then what I need to do? I need to mark this column as a unique. So once I mark this column as unique, means what? Means what? Means it is not going to accept any duplicate value. So if it is not accepting any duplicate value, means the user ID column also going to be unique inside this passport table or not? Yes
Yes.
or no? So if this user ID column is unique inside this passport table, and the user ID also definitely going to be unique inside this user table because that is the primary key column. So means what? There is no duplication is available. There is no duplication. So that is how you can implement one-to-one. So this concept is nothing but unique foreign key, right? Unique foreign key. Another option is that, right? In this case, so what I'm going to do? So this user ID, what I'm creating, not only I'm marking this as my foreign key, also I'm creating this as my primary key. So this user ID, this becomes the primary key, this becomes the foreign key also. So in this case, this unique key constant I don't want to apply because it is I'm making this as the primary key. So primary key means definitely it is going to be unique, and this is also going to be my foreign key. So there are two ways. So this is nothing but you can say shared primary key, right? The primary key will act as a right. The key is will act as a primary key as well as it is also going to be the foreign key. So if I make the foreign key as the primary key, then also it is going to implement one-to-one relationship. Both of these options I'm going to explain. Clear?
Yep.
Clear or not? Okay.
Yes,
Let
sir.
us try to implement.
Yes.
Let us try to implement this example practically, so that right. So what I'm going to do is, I know you guys are having doubts. So what I'm going to do, I will start with without data annotations and the Fluent API. I will use the data annotation and show you how to implement one-to-one, and then I will show you how to implement the same using Fluent API. So that right, anyone having any query, they can also going right clear in this session, right, related to relationship. So let me go ahead and create the user class. So this is my user class I have created. So this user class, it is a very simple class. But here, what is the important thing? In the case of right one-to-one relationship, right? Both the entities are going to contain the reference navigation property. Let me go ahead and create the entities with the reference navigation properties. So now if you look at this right user entity, it is having this user entity, and this user entity is having a reference navigation property or not,
So,
right? And pointing to the other entity, that is password. And again, if you go to the password entity, then it is also containing the reference navigation property pointing to the user entity. And in this case, this user ID is going to be my required relationship. Why I'm saying required? Because I have not put the question mark here. If I put the question mark, then it will become a optional relationship,
small
right?
relation.
Why? Because this column can accept null in the database. But if I remove this question mark, or if I applied the required attribute here, then this column is going to be a, right, what I can say, required column in the database. Now, in this case, this user ID, what I have specified here, this is also going to be my foreign key by default. Why? Because this name, what I have provided here, is nothing but my related navigation property name plus ID or not. What is the relation navigation property name? User. And user plus ID, yes, it is following the default naming convention. So in this case, in the passport table, it is going to create user ID as a required foreign key, which is pointing to the user table. Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes or no?
Yes. Yes.
Now, what I need to do, I need to add these two public, right? I need to create two deficit properties, and one is for, right, what I can say, user, right? Another one is for, right? Another one is for, guys, tell me, passport. So let me give this as a passport table. So with these changes right now, okay, let me give this table name as core TP1. Any name you can give, no issue, right? So I have given this name, and within the with these changes now, if I generate the right migration and apply the migration, then it should have created two tables with the one-to-one relationship, right? So let me go ahead This is my right. I'm writing the command add migration. Any name you can give, which should not be provided earlier. Okay. Then you need to write the update database command. So this should create the database and apply the migration. And now you can verify the same. Guys, today's session might be longer, but I will complete a relationship in today's class. So this is my users table, which is going to contain the primary key. You can see. And this is my right passport table, which is going to contain the foreign key, right? Foreign key integer, and this is not null. And in this case, it is going to implement one-to-one relationship. And to make sure it contains one-to-one relationship, you can open the indexes, and here you can see that the user ID, right, one foreign key on the foreign key, it is applying this unique constant or not? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that means that by default, it is based on the unique constant, it is creating the foreign key. Clear?
Yes.
Right. So this is by default. Now what I need to do is, right, I want to implement the foreign key, right, using data annotation. So how you can do this? So if you want to achieve the same thing using data annotation, then what are the changes you need to do? Guys, tell me. So for data annotation, I want to create this is my key property. So what attribute I need to apply?
Key.
Key
It
attribute.
will be going to my primary key, right? And this is what I want to apply as my foreign key. So if you want to apply this as a foreign key, okay, then what you need to do, this foreign key attribute you can apply right on both what I can say, you
Name
can
of
apply on both killer property as well as on the right navigation reference navigation property. So here I can apply this. So with these changes, right, it is also going to create this as a foreign key, right? Now let me go ahead and migration to. So there should not be any changes in the database, right? So you can refresh and you can re-verify. The foreign key is going to be same, right? So this is going to be my, right, what I can say, passport table, and here you can say ID is the primary key and the user ID is the foreign key. And on the foreign key, it is applying the unique constant, right? So this is nothing but based on the, what I can say, primary key constant. Now what I want to do is, right, I want to generate, right, a different, right, I want to use shared primary key for creating the relationship. Let me first delete this one. Whenever I'm going to change the primary key, I need to change this one. Now what I want to do is, I want to use this primary. So I want to use this as the primary key as well as the reference key. So in this case, what I can do is, I can remove the ID column, which is generated as the primary key. So instead of that, what I'm doing now, I'm creating this user ID. This is going to be my primary key as well as this is also going to be my foreign key. Clear? So with these changes, now only one column is going to be created, which is going to be my primary key as well as the foreign key. And this is the primary key in passport table. And this is also going to be the primary key in the, right, what I can say, user table. So we can call this is a shared primary key. So this is also another way to implement, right, what I can say, this is another way to implement one-to-many relationship. Sorry, one-to-one relationship. Now, if you look at this table, then you should have one column, which is going to be the primary key as well as the foreign key. Right? So this is my primary key and the foreign key. Now, you can see this primary key. So as it is a primary key, no need to apply the unique key. Why? Because primary key it's itself going to handle the uniqueness of the column value. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Right? So now what I need to do, I need to explain how to implement one-to-one, right, one-to-one relationship with the entity framework code. So let us first modify the changes. So what I'm doing here, I'm just replacing these things. So I remove all these things, right? I don't want any kind of thing. So now what my requirement is to implement, right, one-to-many relationship, right? So for this purpose, what I can do is, I can make use of, right, on model creating method. Okay. Okay. So whenever I'm going to implement, right, many to one, right, any kind of a relationship or any kind of a configuration to manage the data or schema in the database, I have to override this on model creating method. So you have to override this on model creating method, and you have to use this model builder instance. And using this model builder instance, you can configure the relationship. So currently we are going to configure the relationship. Let us try to understand. Guys, remember to implement, right, a relationship, right, with the entity framework core, we are provided with the four methods. One is has one, has many, with one, with many, and another one is has foreign key, right? So basically, right, so has one, has many, with one, and with many. So basically, right, whenever you are implementing the relationship, you can have start from the principal entity. You can start configuring either from the principal entity or from the dependent entity, or from the dependent entity. You can start configuration either from the principal entity or from the dependent entity. So let assume we are starting with the principal entity. So in this case, once I start using the principal entity, then on this principal entity, I need to call this method, right? Yeah. And then on the dependent entity, I need to call this method. And then on the dependent entity, this method is going to create the foreign key. Now, if I'm starting with the dependent entity, right, then in that case, on the dependent entity, I need to call the has1 method. And on the principal entity, I need to call it this method. And on the dependent entity, the foreign key is going to be created. So this has1 and has many, they're basically going to represent the type of a relationship. For example, in the principal entity, it should have one navigation property which is pointing to the dependent entity. Am I right or wrong? This is my principal entity. This principal entity should have one navigation property, either of reference type or navigation collection type. Am I right or wrong?
Right.
Right. So whenever we are
Sir.
implementing the relationship means what? The principal entity and dependent entity, they should have some kind of a navigation property. For example, in this case, the principal entity contains one navigation property. If that navigation property is reference type, then what method I need to use? I need to use has1 method. If that navigation property is collection type, then what I need to use? I need to use, right? What I need to use? I need to use has method. Similarly, on the dependent entity, if the navigation property is reference type, then what I need to do? I need to use reference right, with one method. If the navigation property is of, right, collection type, then I have to use this one. And using this method, right, you need to specify the foreign key, right? Whichever property is going to be created as a foreign key, right? Foreign key property of the dependent entity, you need to specify here, right? If this is not clear, let us try to make it clear, right? For example, first of all, using this model builder entity, so you have to specify entity method. So this is going to be a generic method. So to this generic method, you need to specify the entity from which you want to start configuring. You can start from the principal entity. You can also start from the dependent entity. I'm going to show you both the options. Let's start with the principal entity. So in our case, which one is the principal entity, user or passport?
User.
So I
Users.
specify here user. So this is user entity. So to this user entity, right, then what I need to do? So this user entity having one, what I can say, reference navigation property. So for reference navigation property, what method I need to use?
Has1.
Has1. So now come to this part and check, is there any has1 method available?
Yeah.
Yes, has1. So this has1 method, so what I can say, this method is nothing but in this case, use such that. What is that method? What is that property? Guys, tell me.
Which one? User ID. Sorry, passport.
This is the application property, guys, passport. So that what
Okay.
you will
Password.
specify here, right? So this is going right to go passport. Now, Now what I need to do, I need to specify the other end. Other end means the dependent entity. So in the dependent entity, so this is I'm targeting password. Now come to the password entity, passport entity, sorry. So in the passport entity, what is the type of the navigation property?
Reference.
Reference.
So for reference, what method I need to use?
With one.
One.
With one. So now come to here and type with one. So once you type with one, then it will give you intelligence. So now with one means what is the property name here in the dependent entity?
Users.
Is such that p dot user. Clear? Now. So now what I need to do, I need to specify the foreign key, right? So here what I need to do, I need to specify the foreign key, and the foreign key is going to be on which entity? Foreign key means on which entity you want to create. So I want to create a foreign key in the principal entity p such that p dot
User ID.
I'm not getting this one. Anything is missing. Okay. So here, right here, as it is one to one, right? So see, in this case, it is one to one. And here you can create the foreign key on any entity, right? So which entity is going to contain the foreign key? That what I need to specify here. Which entity is going to contain the foreign key, guys? The
Passport.
passport entity contain the foreign key, right? And in the passport entity, what is the column name? That is going to be user ID. Clear? How to configure one-to-one relationship between two entities starting from the principal to the dependent entity. Clear? Now, if you want to do the same thing, right, from the dependent entity to the principal entity, then what I need to do? I need to start configuration from the tell me,
Passport.
right? So passport has one.
Yeah.
Tell me, passport has one.
Has one.
User.
Right, always. Passport has one user. P such that p dot user, right? And each user, right? Each user has one user with one, right? So next one is
with one.
so this is going to be
U dot U equal
you dot password, and then here I need to specify the has foreign key, and here I need to tell this the user ID. So this is going to my password. So always, right? Whether you start from the right what I can say principal entity or dependent entity, no issue. Using this hash method, hash one, here you can use the same hash one method. Using this hash one method, either on the principal entity or on dependent entity, you need to specify the related navigation property. And then based on whatever relation navigation property you specify, then using this with one method, you need to specify the other end, right, navigation property. For example, user has one password and each password with one user, associated with one user. Similarly here, each passport is right has one user and each user is associated with one passport. Yes, and foreign key is going to be created in the right passport entity, and on which column that what you need to specify. If you do not specify this thing, then it will not work. Clear? Anything is fine, right? So let me. I generally prefer to go with from principal to dependent. So I have going with this option. This is also going to work. Right? But you understand, guys, how to use this method? When to use has one, when
Yes,
to
sir.
use one. Is that clear?
Yes.
Right. So with these changes, what I'm going to do, let me delete this one. Let me delete this database also. And let me, right, please make sure there is no other settings are there. Yes, that is fine. And now generate the migration file. Clear? So this is how it should create the database. Clear?
So
Right. Now, is that clear, guys? Anyone having any question? Clear or not? Other option is also there. You can also try this one.
Right.
Right? So this is how you can implement, right, one-to-one relationship using what I can say, right, using Entity Framework or Fluent API. Now, clear? Now, what is my requirement? My requirement is I want to implement, right, the same thing what I have provided here, but I want to. So currently it is, if you look at this, so it is using unique key constraint, right, on the passport. Sorry, in the passports table, user ID foreign key column, it is using. So how I can achieve the right shared primary key? So for example, I don't want this user ID column anymore. So if the user ID column is not available, then by default it is not going to create any primary key. So what I want is this user ID currently we are configuring as my foreign key. The same user ID I also want to mark as my primary key. So how I can do this? So if that is your requirement, then what you need to do? So here you need to configure this password entity, and to this password entity, what you need to do? Has is that has key. Clear? So with this, so currently this is what we are configuring between user and passport, the reference navigation properties. User ID is going to be the foreign key. And also in the passport table, we are also marking the user ID as the primary key. So with these changes, let me again delete this one. And again also delete this one. And let me go ahead and generate the migration file. And this time it should create the what I can say, the shared primary key. Right, so now, right, refresh this one, core DB. This is going to be my passport table, and this user ID you can see primary key and foreign key, and there should not be any right other indexes because this is going to be my cluster index. Clear?
So I have
Clear?
one, yeah, clear. So I have one small question. So without this modeling on model creating also, we were able to create tables. Then why we are doing this?
See, what I have told you right before the things, right? So we are having three different approaches. What are the approaches? One is without using any data annotation Fluent API. I have shown you the example. Using data annotation, I have shown you the example. And using this Fluent API, I have also shown you the example. But as
Skill.
we progress, right, I'm going to discuss some of the advanced concept, right? Which you can easily achieve using Fluent API that is not possible or very difficult to achieve using
Okay.
what I can say data annotation. But any approach, see if what from the beginning what I've said, if default configuration is working fine for your application, go with the default configuration, no issue. If you are achieving the same thing using data annotation, go with the data annotation, no issue. But if it is not possible using default convention or with the right what I can say data annotation, then what you need to do? You need to go with this, right? What I can say, uh, uh,
Code
Fluent
approach.
configurations, right? So this is what you need to understand. But these are the things which is available on all the right. This is available with default. This is available with data annotation. This is also available with right what I can say Fluent API. But as we progress, I'm also going to show you something, right, which is not possible using by default or is not possible using Fluent API. But we have three different approaches, and there is no performance penalty because this is related to database schema, and database schema means one-time activity. Clear?
Yeah.
Yeah. So here I have one doubt. So in line number 18, so it will return passport entity instance only, right? So can't we add directly that line number 21 to that above one? Like,
So you mean you want to return type something like this?
no,
How it is?
go back. No, use a word statement.
Where you need to
At
write
the
line
end,
number?
at the end, dot hash key p dot p user ID. Can't we add it in there itself?
So you mean to here
Yeah.
by getting any ASCII method?
No. Okay.
So see, what you need to remember is, right? So whatever this method is returning, that next method I can call. But whatever this method returning, if that instance, within that instance, if this method is not available, then how I can call it?
Understood.
Clear? So next, what I'm going to discuss is one-to-many, right? And guys, is that clear? This example is clear. How to implement one-to-one relationship using three different approaches. Clear or not?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And how to use
This
this
is a bit
as
tough
one with
to
one method,
remember.
is that clear?
Yes.
Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes.
This is very, very important, right? Now, what I'm going to discuss is next how to implement a right one-to-one relationship, right? So for this purpose, let us take the example of order and a order item. So let me create the order entity first. Order.cs. Let me go ahead and put these things. And guys, now I'm going to keep focus on the right, what I can say, Fluent API rather than this default convention and the data annotations, which we have already discussed, right? So let us proceed and understand. So now in this case, you can see there is some relationship between order and order item. See, you can see order can have multiple order items. Why I'm getting this error? What is this inconsistency accessibility?
Sir, your voice is breaking. I don't know for me or if everybody.
Yes, my voice is breaking.
No, it's clear.
Now it is clear.
Fine.
It's clear.
Okay. Okay, fine. So you can see this is my order entity, and this order entity containing one reference navigation property, or this is a collection navigation property. Guys, tell me.
This is collection navigation.
Collection.
And other entity, it is having this reference navigation, or it is a collection navigation.
It's a
Reference.
reference.
So then what type of a relationship between order and order item? One order can have many order items. Clear? So this is going to be my principal entity. So this is going to be my principal entity. And this is going to be my dependent entity. And the relationship between them is one-to-many. That is, one order can have many order items. And in this case, by default, this is going to be my foreign key. Clear? Because why it is going to be
It's
the
clear.
foreign key? Because the navigation property name is order plus ID, order right. So by default, it is going to be foreign key, and the relationship between them is going to be one-to-many. So what I'm going to do, so let me put these orders here, and this is orders, and this is going to be my order ID. Now what I want to do is I want to configure the one-to-many relationship between order and order items. How you can do this? How I can do this, guys? Tell me.
Model, not entity.
Okay, so first of all, we need to start configuring either from the principal entity or dependent entity. So first of all, you need to decide which one is the principal entity and which one is the dependent entity. Yes, in my example, order is the principal and order item is the dependent. So now I want to configure the one-to-many relationship. So now model builder dot entity, whichever entity, this is a generic. So let's start with the order entity, right? So this is the generic method, and then this one dot. So now if I go to the order entity, then this method type is a reference or a collection.
Collection.
Collection. Collection means I need to use has one or has many.
As
As
many.
many.
As many.
Right. So here you have to use has many. So has many means what is that related navigation property? This is going to be order item. So here what I can do. So here O such that O dot order items. Clear? Then from the order items, this is going to be the dependent entity. What type of navigation property is this?
With one.
Reference.
Reference means which method I need to use, with one or with many?
With
With
one.
one.
With one, right? So here what I need to write, we need to write with one. And in this case, right, what I need to do, order item such that, right, OI dot order. Clear? Why? Because this is order. Now, in the order item entity, I need to create the foreign key on this order ID column. So what method I need to use, guys?
As foreign key.
As foreign key, and whatever the foreign key, that what you need to specify. And here, right, you need to specify OI such OI dot
Order item.
order ID. Clear? I am getting this error. Why I'm getting this order? Okay, so this order item is not required here because in this case, right, there is no option that the primary key is going to be created here. It is always going to be in the order item. So here you do not need to specify that. Directly you can use this method. In previous example 1 to 1, you can create the foreign key either in the student entity or in the right what I can say in any entity you can create. But here there is no chance that a foreign key is going to be created on the order. So whatever the order item entity, in that entity is going to be created the foreign key, right? So that what I have specified here. So with this option, right, it is going to create the foreign key, right? So let us, right, what I can do is, okay, let me give a different, okay, so let me delete this one. Not need, I need to delete. Let me go ahead and generate this one. Migration 1, migration 2. Now verify the database. For DP1 tables, and this is order items. It should have created the order item. Clear? And in this case, this should be a non-unique. You cannot make this as a unique constant. Why? Because we are implementing a one-to-many. The same order ID can exist for multiple order items, right? So that is the reason why it is a non-unique. Clear, guys, how to implement a one-to-many relationship?
Yeah.
Okay. Now what I'm going to discuss, right? So whenever we are implementing the relationship, we need to understand something very interesting, that is the cascade delete behavior. Means whenever I'm going to delete the primary entity or principal entity, what will happen to the child entities? That is what we need to understand, right? So if you want to set the default, right? If you want to set the cascade delete behavior, right? Then what I need to do, you need to use the onDelete method. And to this method, right? What I need to do, you need to specify the delete behavior and whatever options now. Now, if you go to this delete behavior, then you will see, right, there are multiple options, right? So you can see the delete behavior, I can set client set null, restrict, set null, cascade, no action, and client no action. So these are the 7 options that what we can specify. Guys, remember, out of these 7 options, right, whenever I'm using client, see in this case, client set null, client cascade, client no action, the rest of this. So you need to understand here, right? This is interesting thing. So we are having the database, and we are also having the context object, the DB context object, right? So in this case, the actual data is going to stored in the database. Data is stored in the database, right? So in the whatever table we are creating, data is stored in the database table. Similarly, right, what happening now, whenever I'm accessing the data from the database, the same data also going to be stored in memory. Yes or no? In my application in memory using the context object or not? Yes or no?
Yes.
Right. For example, right, let me give you this example. For example, if I'm going to create an EFA core DB context class. So EFA core DB context I created. So this is my DB context. And right, so let me give this name as a DB context. So using this DB context dot orders, right, to list. So this to list method I have applied. So in this case, so this is going to return me the orders, all the orders, right? So in this case, this orders data, it is in memory or not? Within our application, we are storing the data inside this variable or not?
Yes, sir.
So this is nothing but your in-memory data. Whatever data you are storing in the database, that is database data. And whatever data we are storing in within our application, that is going to be called as in-memory. And this data is going to be tracked by the DB context object. We have already discussed what do we mean by tracking and how the DB context track the data. So this data, what it is returning, that is going to be tracked by the DB context. Now, what do we need to understand? So you need to understand the data going to be stored in the database, as well as that is also going to be stored in memory using the database context. Now, out of these 7 options, right? So whatever, right, if I come to this part and if I go to this delete behavior, so here you can see these things. So out of these 7 options, whatever client is specified, suppose here you can see set null, here you can see set null, and this is client set null. Here you can see cascade, and here you can see client cascade. Here you can see no action, and here you can see client no action. So what exactly it means? It means if something is specified using client, means what? That operation is only in memory, not in the database when you call the substances method. So this is only applicable to the data which is stored in memory, not in the database. Clear? Okay, let me give you more example, right? For example, if I'm using if I'm using client set null, so there are 2 options. One is client set null, another one is set, right? So if I set the onDelete behavior as a client set null, or if I set the onDelete behavior as this one, and for example, you can see if I set this behavior as a client set, right? A client set null. So in this case, what will happen? In this case, client set null, we access the data. For example, we are accessing this order data. What I'm doing, right? Okay, let me do one more thing here. I'm just accessing the first method, right? So find method, right, by the primary key 1. So this is going to return me one order. And then what I'm doing here, I'm removing that order, right? From DB context dot remove method, and I'm passing this order. So what exactly it is going to do? It is going to remove the order from the context object. So if I'm using set null, so this order is removed from the context object. But what about the related order item? So if you look at this order item, order table, one order can have multiple order items. If I'm removing that order, then what will happen to the order item? So that is what going to be decided by this. If I'm using a client set null, then in the in-memory object, right, in the database in-memory object, so this data is going to be set to null. And if I use set null, it will be applicable to both the database and both in-memory. So if I'm using client set null, only the data which is stored in the context object, the related entities are going to be set to null. And if I use set null option, not only in the related entity in the database context, they are going to be set to null, but also the related entity which is stored in the database order items table, that foreign key property value is set to clear. Similarly, okay, forget about this. Suppose I'm going to use this cascade option. I'm going to use this cascade option. Cascade option means what? Now you have 2 options. One is cascade and another one is client cascade. So if I'm using cascade, then what will happen? Now, whenever I'm deleting the primary entity, principal entity, then that related entities are going to be deleted from both the DB context as well as from the database when the set changes method is called. If I'm using client cascade, then what will happen? The data is going to be deleted from the right context object, not from the database. So the point that what you need to remember, they are provided 2 options. And based on your requirement, you can use any of the options. If you want to delete the data from both the context object and from the database, you can go with this cascade option. If you don't want to delete the database, whatever the default behavior or database, that will be applicable on the database side. But from your in-memory data, you want to delete the related entities, then in that case, you need to go with the client cascade. So most of the time, as per your requirement, what you want. You want to, right? So there are different scenarios. One of the scenario, you don't want to delete the, you want to restrict, right? You want to restrict, right? You want to restrict deletion of the principal entity. So you want to restrict the deletion of principal entity when related entities are exist. When related entities are exist, this is one of the scenario. Another option, right? What you need to do, right? When delete the primary entity, when delete the principal entity, right? When delete the principal entity, also delete the related entity. Also delete the related entity. This is another option. That is second option. So third option is what? Now when delete the principal entity, set null to the foreign key in the dependent entity. Dependent entity, right? Here the terms and condition is that, so here the T and C is that, T and C is that foreign key should accept null value. Foreign key should accept null value. Otherwise, you will get some kind of a exception. Clear? Yes or no? So these are the different scenario. What are the scenario? Particularly, I'm not going to allow the deletion of principal entity if that principal entity is referenced by some of the right independent entities. That is one scenario. If that is your scenario, then what you need to do? You need to use the restrict option. So it will not allow the deletion of the data. Now, what is your requirement? No. When I am going to delete the principal entity, I'm also going to delete the related entities. Then what you need to do? You need to use the cascade option. And this is going to be right there, set null. Right? So whenever I'm going to delete the principal entity, the related entity, they should set to null value. Right? And the condition is that foreign key should accept null value, otherwise it is going to give you some exception. Clear or not? Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you the example of a cascade. A REST example you can set. So here what I need to do, you just need to set the delete behavior as cascade. That's it. So this is going to be at one order as many order items, and each order item is associated with one order. And in the order item entity, the order ID going to be the foreign key, and the foreign key is going to be created based on the on delete cascade behavior. Right? That is what we have specified. Next, what I need to do, I need to delete this one, generate the database one more time, right? And then generate the migration.
Sir, and as you said initially, it won't be possible with the data annotations and default conventions,
This
right?
is not possible, right? So this on delete cascade option, what I'm specifying here, this specific, this is not possible with the data annotation. Data annotation means whatever the default behavior on database, that is. Specifying explicitly the delete behavior is not possible using data. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Right? So that is what I'm saying now. Complexity, if you want to achieve, then you have to go with the right Fluent API, which is not possible using data. So now, if you open this one, and if you open the select statement, then it should have created with the undelete cascade option.
Sir, here can we differentiate? Can we implement other things with the data annotations, and can we only add for this delete option with the
That is
Fluent
fine.
API?
That is fine. That is fine. That is possible. Right? In
Okay.
that case, what will happen? Right? Both will come into the picture. But if you configure the same thing, right? If you configure the same thing, you are configuring the foreign key in the using data annotation, and you are configuring the foreign key using this Fluent API, then Fluent API will take the precedence over data annotation. Both you can use Some of the thing you can manage using data annotation, some of the thing you can manage using, right, Fluent API. That is absolutely fine. And if
Understood.
you can also specify the same thing using data annotation and using Fluent API, but in that case, Fluent API will take the right precedence over data annotation. So that is what we have provided. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the example that example in the sense whether it is deleting the data or not. That what I'm going to show you. Right. So for this purpose, let me first add few orders to the database table, and then I'm going to delete the order from the primary or you can say principal entity, and then I'll show you whether the related child entities are deleted automatically or not. So in this case, what I'm doing here, I'm creating the context object. I'm adding few order. You can say order number, order date. So in the order table, you can say order date, order number, and a list of order items. ID is going to be the primary key. So this is my list of order items. Two items I can provide here: product name A, product name B. So in the order item C, you can see product name and the order ID, which is all automatically set. So this is one order with order ID 1. This is another order with the order ID, right, word is 002. So here I'm adding both the order to the context object of the orders collection property, dbset property, calling the set changes method. This will create two orders, and each order is going to be created with the two order items. That what you can also see, order number and the number of order items that count means how many items are there. And then what I'm doing here, I'm fetching all the orders. While I'm fetching all the orders, I'm also including the order items, right? So this is right for what purpose I'm retrieving the data. I'm retrieving the data only for the right data retrieval purpose. And guys, remember, when you are retrieving the data only for the what I can say read operation, it is always right. It is always to use as no tracking. So this as no tracking will give you better performance. Now the context object is not going to track this data. So if you right. So the point that what you need to remember, if you are not going to perform any update delete operation on the retrieved data, then it is always better to use as no tracking for better performance. Why? Because context object now not going to track this record. So if context object not tracking this record means the performance will be better. When the context object is tracking the data, little bit time it will take to track the information. If no tracking means it is going to give a little better performance. And when to use no tracking, so I need to use no tracking when the data what I'm retrieving is only for read operation, not for update and delete operation. So in this case, I'm displaying the data. That is the reason why I'm using as no tracking. Clear? Clear or not? So here I'm displaying the order number and the list of order items. That's it. So let me run the application and see whether this is working fine or not. So you can see two orders are created, fetching all order information. Order ID this, order ID 2 is this. This is the data. Now, if you look at this order items table, then you should see 4 order items. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete one principal entity. And after delete operation, I'm going to show you, right, how many orders are there in the database, right? So for this purpose, what I'm going to do is, right, so very simple logic I have to implement here. So order, I'm loading the related order items, and I'm using first or default method to load the right order which ID is one. So basically, I'm retrieving the first order. So order to delete, if this is not null, then what I'm doing here, I'm displaying, right? I'm displaying the items what I'm going to delete, and then I'm passing this method to the remove method, and I'm calling the save changes method, and then I'm displaying this order, and its items are successfully deleted. After the deletion, what I'm doing here, I'm again trying to access the data from the database of the same order ID which is already deleted. And if the data is already deleted, right, then it should return me null. And if it return null, then I'm displaying this message that order with ID has been deleted from the database, right? Again, what I'm doing, and again, what I'm doing here, I'm fetching the order items where order ID is 1. So to make sure order, not only order is deleted, but also the order items of the same order ID is also deleted. So for that purpose, what I'm doing, I'm using this one and calling the toList method. And if the count equals to 0, that means what? That means all related order items are deleted. And if count is not equals to 0, means what? Some of the order IDs are still present means our application is not working as expected, right? So with these changes, let me try and run the application and see whether the data is being deleted or not. See, order and its related data was successfully deleted. All related order items for order ID 1 have been also deleted. Now, if you check this one, so whichever order ID, you can see these two ID with 1 and 2, they are going to be deleted, and now the database should contain only 3 and 4. Clear?
Yep.
Clear? That's how to implement
Yeah.
right here one-to-many relationship and along with the cascade delete behavior. Is that clear? Anyone having any more question related to this configuration? Now, you guys tell me, if I want to start the configuration from the dependent entity, then how I can do this? Model builder, then I need to start with a what method? Order item. And in the order item, each order item belongs to how many order? One or multiple?
One.
Order.
One
One
order.
order.
Only
One.
one
One
order.
order. So here, what method I need to use? I need to use has one. So all one or each order item can belongs to a particular order, right? So
Orders.
here,
Why dot order?
right? So then each order has, right? Each order is associated with a many order items,
Many,
right?
many order items. Yes.
Then we need to specify the foreign key and then whatever the delete behavior, that what you need to specify, right? Clear? So you want to understand when to use has many and when to use with many. If you understand these two things, right, then defining relationship is just a piece of cake. Clear or not?
Yep.
This is how you can implement, right, one-to-many relationship with cascade delete behavior. Next, what I'm going to discuss, guys, today's session, I will take another 30 minutes because I want to complete this relationship. Tomorrow we are going to start, right, model wide configuration. So already we have discussed what we mean by many-to-many relationship. Many-to-many relationship, both principal and dependency. In the case of many-to-many, there is no dependent entity altogether. Right, so there is no dependent entity. Both the entities will be considered as principal, and in this case, a joining table will be created. Both entities involved in the relationship, they are going to contain, right? What they are going to contain collection application property. So for this purpose, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use student and courses entities. So let me create a class file called course student. So this is my student entity. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the courses entity. So this is going to my courses entity, student and courses. And here also it is having the, right, what I can say, collection properties, right? So you can say ID, course name and student collection property. From the student, ID name and courses collection property, right? So by default, it is going to create a joining table. That's fine. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to configure the same thing, right, using Fluent API configuration. So let us do this. So for site, so what I'm going to do is, right, I'm going to do these things. Right. So in this case, as you can see, both the entities are containing, right? Both the entities are containing collection property. So means what? Which are method I'm going to use? I'm going to use, let's tell me which method has many and with many.
With many.
Right? So here you can see student, I'm starting from the student. You can start from principal entity, dependent entity, no matters. If I'm starting from student has many courses and the course has many student. And this is optional. Optional means what? If you want to specify a different table name for the joining table, right, then you can use this using entity. If you do not specify, no issue. If you want to specify, you can specify. So in this case, it is going to create the joining table with this name. So with these changes right now, or right, you can generate the, right, what I can say, uh, right, migration file to see the changes. So this is going to my courses, and this is going to my course entity, right? So with these changes, let me also delete these things, otherwise I will get compiled an error. So with these changes, let me delete this one. Clear? So joining table, whatever name I provided, that is going to be the joining table, and it is maintaining the many-to-many relationship. So for many-to-many relationship, you have to use the has many and with many methods. Clear? Or anyone having any question?
Also.
Is it clear? So this is, if you want to see how to store the data, right, then you can also modify the example. Let me also give the example to show you the data, whether it is storing the data. We have already discussed this thing, right? That is the reason why I'm not giving more emphasis on this. So here you can see I'm adding some student and courses and displaying. So how you can add courses? So this is my course 1, course 2, course 3. This is my student 1, student 2, student 3, and each student, right, they can enroll to course 1, course 2, course 2, course 3, course 1, and course 3, right? So this is how it is related. So here I'm using the add range method to add the list of students 1, student 2, and student 3, and this student was, as it is containing these reference properties, they are also going to be created automatically, right? So let me go ahead and create this one, and then I'm displaying that students details. So students include courses, and here, as we are calling this for the display purpose, so it is better to use as no tracking method. So now run the application and it should display the data as expected, right? So let me go ahead. See, this is displaying the data as expected. Clear, guys?
Yep.
Right, so this is not difficult, right? So
Okay.
once you understand, right? Once you understand what method I need to use, how
Yep.
to use to maintain the relationship, then right, maintaining the relationship between one to one, one to many, many to many is very simple. What you need to remember, you need to remember these four methods. So, and what method I need to use at what scenario. If you understand this four method, any type of a relationship, right, will come into picture. You can easily write the code. Clear or not?
Yep. Clear.
Yes, sir.
Anyone having any question, guys? So in this case, course data will be stored in the course table, students data will be stored in the students table, and student course table is going to contain the joining data. Next one, I'm going to discuss the last thing today's session is self-referential relationship. Right? Self-referential relationship means what? So currently, if you look at the course and the students table, okay, forget about course and student. So if you look at this order and order item. So in this case, the order is a table, order item is another table. The foreign key what I'm creating here, it is pointing to the same table or to a different table. Foreign key what I'm creating here, it is pointing to the same table or to a different table.
Different table.
Different table, sir.
Right, different table. So when the foreign key is going to point to itself, when the foreign key is pointing to itself, then that kind of a relationship is said to be self-referential relationship. Means the primary key and the foreign key both are going to be created in the same table. The foreign key will be pointing to the primary key of the same table. So that is nothing but self-referential relationship. If you take the example, so in the organization, so you are working as an employee and you are working under one manager. That manager is itself an employee or not? That means both manager data and the employee data will be stored in the same employee table, but where your manager ID is going to be the foreign key. Similarly, if you are
Yes.
looking at the category example, right? We are having a category. Inside that category, that category belongs to one parent category, subcategory, subcategory, right? So different level of category, but all these categories are going to be stored in the same database table. So let us understand this, right, with one example, right? Let me first give this example using this employee. So let me go ahead and create the right class employee.cs. So this is first I will explain using right what I can say uh, data annotation, then I will explain right. So first of all, without using data annotations, right? So now in this case, so this is my subordinates. So a collection of subordinates. So this is my manager. So in this case, his manager ID is going to be created as a foreign key.
Yes, sir.
But
For
this
particular
foreign,
employee ID.
and what type of a foreign key is this?
Self-referential.
Self-referential.
Optional.
Optional or mandatory?
Optional.
Optional.
Means what? Means one employee can have a manager, and it cannot be have a manager. If he itself, if he is a manager, and if he doesn't have any manager, then in that case, this manager ID column is going to be clear.
No.
And in this case, one employee can belongs to one manager, and within one employee can many employees right can going to be work. Suppose this employee if itself a manager, then in that case under this employee many employees are going to be work. So that subordinates is going to be the collection property. So in this case you can see both the reference navigation property and the collection navigation properties are there or not.
Yes, sir.
So if one is the reference navigation
Sub-manager
property,
is, yes, subordinate is I collection.
connection. That means one too many relationship is there. One employee can have multiple subordinates. Subordinates means the employees which are working under that
Work
manager.
under the manager.
And each manager, right? And each employee is associated with one manager. Inside one employee, he can have multiple subordinates, but each employee can have only one manager, right? And if he itself a manager, he might not have any right parent manager. So in that case, this manager ID is going to be null, right? So let us understand this one. So what I'm going to
Sir,
do
is
is,
it mandatory to create a, instance over there?
sorry,
Go to employee class. So is it mandatory to create instance for list of employee? I mean,
hey, if I'm not creating this one, right, how it is going to represent one-to-many relationship? For one-to-many relationship, what we need? See, if you are removing this, that's fine. But if you want to
no,
retrieve
I'm
the
asking. I'm asking
employee,
about new list of employee.
sorry,
That's a new list of employee. Last one, constructor. I mean,
see,
list.
this is you can remove, not no
Yeah,
issue.
that's what I asked. Yeah.
So in this case, what will happen? Right, so this is going to be a property just chart initializing with some default value, not an issue, right? So okay, let me delete this one, and let me also go ahead and delete this table, and also let me delete the data. So this data I also need to delete. So whatever code I have written. Okay. Now let me go ahead and create the migration file. The employee ID is there. Manager ID is also going to be there, right? Manager ID, it is a nullable type column. Clear, guys? Now let us test this functionality, right? Right, test this functionality and then we can stop, right? So in this case, right, you can see, let me go ahead and take operational score. So here, let us try to understand. So I'm inserting some employees and then I'm displaying the employee tree, right? So hierarchical data, right, we are going to return. So first of all, we are checking if there is at least one employee, then I'm not going to add the employee and I'm simply returning. If at least one employee is not there, then go ahead and create some employee. First of all, I'm creating two manager. So what is that manager? Right, you can see why I'm saying this as manager, because their manager ID is not there. Their manager employee is not there, right? So manager ID is not there means they are simply manager. So this is subordinate one and subordinate two. So this subordinate one and subordinate two are working under the manager, which working under this manager and list manager, right? And create subordinates under manager two. So now this subordinate two, subordinates 3, 4, 5. These three employees are working under this manager Bob, right? So this is Alice is a manager, Bob is a manager. This employee Charlie, David, they are working under Alice. If and unless these three employees are working under Bob. How you can specify using this manager property, right? Clear, guys? Yes or no? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Right? If you are getting confused, right, let me simplify this thing. So what I'm doing here, context dot employees dot add manager one, context dot employees dot add manager two. So I'm creating two manager. So manager one. So what will be its ID, guys? Here ID will be one, and here the ID will be. Tell me, for this manager, what will be the ID? ID is going to be two. Clear? So I have created these two, manager one and manager. Then what I need to call, what I need to do, I need to call the step changes method. That means these two manager is created at this point of time. Now, so instead of specifying the manager, what I'm doing here, I'm specifying the manager ID. So manager dot employee ID, and here the manager ID is going to be so manager one, whatever its employee ID. So that is also possible. That is how we can also specify. Similarly, for this one, right, what I can do is I can also specify the same thing here. So here manager 2 dot employee ID, this is also going to be 2 dot employee ID, and this is also going to be 2 dot, okay, let me give this step, 2 dot employee ID. Now, what I need to do, I just need to add this up. So here I'm using add range method, which is can take multiple right instances. All these 5 instances I have added and call the step changes method. Is that clear what I'm doing here?
Yeah.
So whatever I have
Okay.
done earlier, this is also the same thing that what I'm doing, right? And this is my display method, right? So what I'm doing here, you can see I'm accessing all the managers. So employee, while I'm accessing the employee, the related subordinates or the related entities, I'm including, but I'm accessing only those manager. Manager means where manager ID is not. And in this case, as we are not going to do any right other operations, right, any insert any operator delete operation, better to use as no tracking. So it will return all the managers, that manager ID and manager name it is going to display, and then under each manager, right, how many subordinates are there, that subordinate ID and subordinate name it is going to display. So let me run the application and show you this data. So manager ID 1, name Alice, subordinate 3 and 4, manager ID 2, right, name Bob, and the subordinate ID are going to be 5, 6, and 7. Clear, guys? How to implement this one to, right, what I can say, relationship. Now, the same thing I want to achieve, right, using this one. So how I can do this? Let me do this. So what we need to do, guys? Tell me. First one is model builder
Model builder
dot
dot and
entity method.
And
So this is a generic method. What method? What is the entity in this case?
employee.
Employee,
employee.
right? So employee entity. So each employee, right, has
Many
many, what you can say, EMP
E-
such that
EMP
EMP dot
subordinates
subordinates.
So
And each subordinates, right, is associated with
with
exactly
one employee.
One manager.
EMP such, right? So here we can see. Okay, so let's give this as E. So let give this as a manager, MGR. So for better understanding, each manager can have multiple subordinates, and each subordinates, or you can say EMP, is having only one, manager. And here, right, the foreign key you want to create on which column? Right? And any delete behavior you want to apply, guys, tell me. delete restrict. That means I'm not going to provide any deletion for the employee. Clear? You can, if you want to set null, that is fine. If you want to set cascade, that is also fine. Anything you can specify. Clear or not?
Sir.
Right? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes.
Yes, this is how you can specify. Right? So that's it. Right? Another example I have given. This is for your reference. So category example I have given. Right, parent category, subcategory, how you can create similar to your, right, what I can say, employee example, right, where it is going to store the data in a hierarchical level, level 1, level 2, and level 3 kind of a data. It is going to store something like this. So category is electronic, subcategory is computer, subcategory is equal to laptop. Inside this laptop, these are the products. So this is how it is going to display the data, right? So clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so
Yeah.
this is, you can implement, right, one to one, one to many, many to many, and self-referential relationship using entity framework or Fluent API. So tomorrow, what I'm going to discuss, I'm going to discuss how we can implement global configuration, entity configuration, property configuration, and how to create a table without primary key. Right, so these are the things what we will discuss tomorrow. Four things, and next I'm going to discuss asynchronous programming and bulk operations. How you can perform operation using entity framework or bulk operation with right, some third-party extension, paid third-party extension versus open source or free third-party extension, and then the performance benchmark between the, right, what I can say, all these bulk operation methods provided by different external packages, or you can say the entity framework core method. And then you can decide which one is the best approach and which method you need to use. And then we'll discuss the disconnected entities, storage procedures, batch processing, job scheduler, and the entity framework core inheritance, transaction, right? All the advanced concepts we will discuss, right? What? So for tomorrow we are going to discuss how we can implement global configuration, entity configuration, property level configuration, and how to create a table without primary key. Clear, guys?
So, sir, can I ask one doubt?
Yes, please.
Sir, what exactly that mean by the delete behavior? Means delete behavior. That delete behavior in the thing, this
So
thing
there
that
is,
only.
you mean you want to understand what you mean by delete behavior, right?
Yes, yes,
So do you have any basic knowledge of a database?
yes, yes.
So you just tell me what do you mean by, right, whenever you are creating, right? Okay, let me open this one. So this is my employee table, right? Okay. Right. So in this case, right, whenever I'm creating any foreign key and it is adding something called on delete cascade. So what do you mean by this one, on delete cascade? This is not related to entity framework code. This is your SQL Server statement, right? Whatever statement I'm showing here, it is related to SQL Server. You just tell me what do you mean by this statement.
Sir, if I delete the order ID, then corresponding order items also will be deleted.
Yes, that is what the meaning of cascade delete, na? So what do you mean
Yes.
by delete behavior means? So whenever I'm deleting the principal entity, what will happen to the related entities in the child table? Whether you want to delete those entities, whether you want to set the foreign key as in all, foreign key column value as null, whether you want to restrict or allow the deletion of the principal entity. But what behavior, right? How the delete operation is going to be handled? That is what you need to specify using this delete behavior. Cascade means what? Cascade means once the parent entity is deleted, the corresponding child entities are going to be deleted. Right? If I use set null means what? Once the parent entity is deleted, the corresponding child entities means that foreign key column in the right, what I can say, child entity, that foreign key column is going to set with the null value. If I set this one to restrict, then what exactly it means? It means it will not allow you to delete the primary entity if the related child entities are referring to that primary entity. That is what the delete behavior, and that is what I have discussed first now. This is what I have already discussed here. Restrict deletion of the principal entity when the related entity exists. Restrict. When delete the principal entity, also delete the related entities cascade. When delete the principal entity, set null to the foreign key in the dependent entity. Terms and condition that foreign key should accept null values. Set null. This is what we have discussed. What is your query inside these things? What is your query related to this thing? I see. The thing is that, right, why you are not getting clarity? Only because you are not good at SQL. So whatever, see guys, remember whenever we are working with the entity framework core, means what? Means we are working with a database only. And for this purpose, good database knowledge is required. Because I cannot explain all the database concept here. Right? Because here, whatever required, I can explain. But I cannot explain all the database concept, right? Whenever I'm explaining, right, ASP.NET code. For example, this delete behavior is fine. What about the update cascade? Similar to delete, what will happen to the related entities when I'm updating the database, right? The primary entity. So this thing, right? Because as we progress, right, we are going to discuss many things, right? But at that time, I'm not going to discuss the right SQL things. Our main objective to learn entity framework core, ASP.NET core, not to learn SQL server. SQL server, I assume you know. So I'm not here to explain, sir, what is the use of an insert statement, what is the use of a delete statement, how to create a storage procedure, how to create a storage function, right? How to create a trigger, how to create a view, how to create a job, right? How to schedule a job, right? What do you mean by SQL Server agent? What do you mean by SQL profiler? So these things I'm not going to explain. I'm going to use them. So once time comes, I'm going to show you, right? Even after few sessions, right? I'm going to show you how to consume storage procedure, how to consume storage function. But at that time, I'm not going to explain what is a storage procedure, what is the syntax to create a storage procedure. Can we create storage procedure with input parameter? Can we create storage procedure with output parameter? How the right output parameter works with right? So these are things I'm not going to explain, right? So these things you should know. If you know, that's fine. If you don't know, then please try to learn this thing. Because, right, again and again, I'm saying if you want to become a good developer, how much importance you are giving to ASP.NET Core and C Sharp, that much of importance you should give to your SQL Server. Clear? Those who are having some idea related to this cascade delete behavior and all this thing, they can easily understand this concept. Those who never worked with these things, right, they will find little difficult. But whatever I explain, I think I have explained all the delete functionality, right? How it is working. Even I have also shown you the example practically. If I'm deleting the primary entity order table, the related order items are also automatically deleted. Practically also I have explained. Theoretically I have explained how to create this thing right through entity framework code. That also I have explained. After this, any question? Right? How? What exactly I need to explain? Uh, right after this thing, right? So you need to write. You need to give some kind of emphasis to your SQL server, right? So without the SQL server, right, it is very difficult to understand this entity framework code, right, behind the scene story, right? Right? Why I'm saying, because this thing nobody is going to explain to you. People are only right if you join any. Right, let me stop the recording. So this is not related to what I can say.